Good morning. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It is great to see you. Jane, my love, you are right at the top this morning. Good to see you. Good morning in Wales. Gayla, good morning. I think I just sent an order out for you. Good to see you in Missouri. Sunny and mild. April, sunny in Illinois. Good morning. Candace in North Texas. Is it raining there? It was swelteringly hot, right? Pendulum just keeps swinging. I have to say, before I start this program, it's a amazing program today. I'm taking you with me from the weekend, this past weekend. Remember, I took that day trip over to Wethersfield, Connecticut, and I went into the Webb Deane Stevens house where they were doing this amazing talk on Saturday called Digging Deeper. And it's about handcrafts. I'm tempted to say women's handcrafts. I think that's okay to say. I think everything I saw was made by a woman, as you would expect at that time, like 18th and 19th century handwork, sewn work, and a few hook rugs. So it was such a bang up event. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. It was led by Linda and Elizabeth, who did an amazing job talking us through a ton of items that are not typically seen or on display for the public because, as you can imagine, all house museums and historic societies, preservation societies, there's typically, I don't know what the right word is. And I remember in theater we used to say wardrobe, right? They have a wardrobe full of, a store full of items that can't be displayed all the time, and maybe some items that need special restoration or work. So it was such a pleasure to look at some things, pieces of handwork, examples of mourning art and samplers, this kind of thing that are not typically seen. Because you feel extra special when you are beholding something that is not typically beholden. So it was a great day, and I want to talk that through with you together. I have to say, Monday, I know a lot of you are struggling with allergies. I have had the worst 48 hours. I'm better today, but I felt like I had brain damage for the last 2 days. And taking allergy medicine, I couldn't find the one that we were talking about because I think it's just in Canada. And I ended up taking Claritin, and man, it was like, waiting for the van from Bedlam to come and collect me because it was very hard pushing through. I have never had allergies before, and I am still having trouble with my brain connecting from one thing to the next. So bear with me if the words aren't coming freely. It is amazing what an effect having allergies has on your presence of mind. So be gentle with me, as you always are, as you always are. I just wanted you to know I wasn't drinking early in the morning the other day. I was really struggling, and I took a COVID test too, which was negative because it was that bad. So let's see. Linda B, good to see you. Linda Ann, good to see you. Melissa, all my buddies are here this morning. Kirsten, you made it back. Good to see you. Carol P, good to see you. Carol, I'm going to run your photos from the Cream City event on Monday. So we'll be looking forward to that. Some fairy tale rugs and some beautiful photos that Carol took and put in our Facebook group, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club. Linda Ann, I would love to look at that house. Oh God, the house is. When you come and visit, we'll go over there. They have more than one house along the main street in Wethersfield. It is so spectacular. And I remember, and I said when I went in, I remember going there many years ago, like before. It might have been before I even went to college for theater. I don't think it was. I think it was after that, because I was in London and then I was in Amsterdam for like 10 years. I think it was somewhere in there. So it was a long time ago, and it was before they kind of rebranded the museum, and it was just called the Silas Deane House, I think. But I remember I went for this super atmospheric event. I will never forget where we walked along the main street, the people who showed up for it, all of these like, early American houses, right? Important revolutionary characters, kind of George Washington slept here, this kind of thing. Every house on the main street, really charming. And at that time, the old tavern on the main street, it's different now, but then I think it was extra charming, much more charming and old. And we walked along the main street and went in and out of a couple of houses, and they were telling kind of spooky stories, not necessarily ghost stories, but kind of Halloweeny stories. And there was pumpkins all over the place. And then my sister and I, maybe my mom was there, went into the tavern for some kind of like sugary rum drinks. It was just amazing. It's even more amazing now. So I'm certainly going to be joining as a member, which I have not had time to do yet. I need to go on the website and do that. And I was even thinking about trying to host an event there because they have a beautiful, where's my phone? I'll have to show you. Not all of the pictures are in the slideshow because I knew I wouldn't get to them all today, and I've been a little rushed this morning. But they have a beautiful barn in the back. It's beyond beautiful. Let me show you. It's going to drive me crazy. Let me just see where I put my phone. And I thought of maybe for those of you who are fairly local, we can maybe have an event there, like maybe before the holidays kind of a thing. We'll have to see what the situation is. But I thought that could be fun for doing something with more than one teacher. I am planning a big sort of retreat thing with Deborah Wallen for next year. But for this year, I thought it's still so early. Is it? So early in the year. I thought maybe I could plan something with a few different teachers, and I'm looking for a space to do that. That would be my first sort of qualification is that something be atmospheric, right? That's where my head is always at. Let me see if you can see this picture of the barn in the back. That's off my phone. So you see a little light coming through, but what a pretty building. It's like a vast building. So that's a to be continued. Let's see what we can do with that. But I'm very happy with the house, with what they've got, with the quality of the people who are there as docents, working volunteers, I'm not sure. But the people who are present to talk to are super approachable, friendly, fun, knowledgeable. It was an all-around pleasure. And sometimes it isn't. I won't say, but I went to one place with my sister. It was so good for laughs. I know that sounds awful. And to be fair, they weren't officially open, but it was such a pig's breakfast. It was hilarious, and not in a good way, right? Not in a good way when you go somewhere and you're looking for information and you have a few very basic questions. The Webb Deane Stevens house is not like that at all. It's the real deal. It's a really, really good destination, worth taking a drive. And more on that in a second. Crystal, gorgeous day in Nova Scotia. You deserve it. Good to see you. Allie, good morning. Judy, good morning. Put that coffee on. Get ready for the tour. Get it ready. We're never going to get to it all today. It's going to be a two-parter. But I think if you are watching me, number one, you love art. Number two, you love history. Number three, you're up for adventures, right? So you are going to love this tour because it's filled with pictures of old things that they have there that are so special. And I hope it spurs a lot of conversation in the thread. Places that are near you, wherever you are in the world, jump in and say, we have a local historic place like this in Wisconsin, in Australia, in wherever you're viewing from, because other people might be watching who are not able to leave chats because they don't have a Google linked email, right? Because that is a thing. But maybe they'll get good information and go, oh, I'm near enough to that I'd like to do that too. If you're near enough to Wethersfield, Connecticut, you have got to come to the Webb Deane Stevens. See, it's hard to not say just Silas Deane Museum. I like the rebranding though. I do. No, you are not late, Dawn. You are just right. Just getting started. Sharon, good to see you. Sunny in Vancouver. Digging that piece behind you. Oh, don't get me started. I fell completely out of love with this. I liked the hooked K facet part, but I fell completely out of love with it. I started I'll show you in a minute. I started working on a smaller piece. This is the vase, the flower vase thing I was working on, right? And it's all hooked with K facet quilt material in the background. I hate this stuff. So this is going just like that. That's all going. But I don't know. I'm not loving the way the flowers are coming out. I've barely touched on them, but I can already tell that they're making me quite angry. And I am going to pick up with our plan for the day, but I'll just show you this. We'll get some hooking talk in first. I started doing a much smaller piece for teaching in person, hooking with quilt fabrics. So this is a different jelly roll by K Facet. It's called, I think, Ocean. There's more than one Ocean, but it's the blue one. So I'm hooking with this now, and as you can see, I'm making a much smaller composition. This is my magnet, so don't look at that. That's not part of the composition, although it certainly has inspired the composition itself. You can see how many times I've reworked this composition. This is the design part of rug hooking, right? This is the business part of rug hooking that is no fun at all. I was hooking it like crazy, and thank God for Agatha Raisin, because I was watching a marathon hooking, pulling out, hooking, pulling out. I do it too. But for a teaching piece, it really needs to be perfect. This piece, I'm going to change the colors out, and you can see I'm adding some flowers. This piece is going to be called Square Peg Bouquet, and I'll be teaching this both online and at a few places locally. But this is all quilting material, and if you saw my video that I posted yesterday, this is all K Facet quilting material. I am going to kind of ombre out. The jelly roll gives me that kind of opportunity. This is less than one strip of a jelly roll, right? I don't have the measurements in my head of what a jelly, how long it is, but it's quite long and very skinny. But you can see it still goes quite a long way, and I'm fooling with the colors now. But this, I'll show you this probably before I resolve that, because that is causing me grief and aggravation, which can happen with crafts, right? They're supposed to be fun, but sometimes when you turn them into a business, it's a little bit less fun. That's a big to be continued. Goretti, great to see you in Ontario. Allergies, hi there too, right? Interesting, because I was thinking, where can I drive to in my immediate radius that I can get some relief? And the answer was absolutely nowhere. It seems to be high everywhere right now. So if you have allergies too, we have all been suffering. Sandra, good to see you. A cloudy day in Richmond Hill, Georgia. Dave, good to see you. Sunny and warm in Toronto. Where are your scissors? You get those scissors and get going. I always like to know when you're working on stuff when my mouth is running, right? It's nice to know that you're there working on your projects and you're listening and looking up now and then. That is just what I want our time together to be. Judy, is quilt fabric hard to hook with? Judy, it's not hard to hook with, not at all. A few questions came up about hooking with quilt fabric. It is obviously thinner than other materials we're used to, like wool, jerseys, things that we talk about more, velvet. The quilt fabric is thinner. So initially I was thinking it would be ideal if I could do a project and teach a project where I was rug hooking with a rug hook or a latch hook with the toggle busted off, right, or taped down. Into latch hook backing, because then I wouldn't have to worry about hoops or frames. And I do often, and for the first book, I did a project where I hooked into latch hook backing with antique paisley scarves, and it looks beautiful. And they're not super thick, but they're a lot thicker than quilt material. So I came up with a few sort of declarations, right, that I'll make without, I don't like black and white, and I don't like rules. And you might find a better way of doing something that I have struggled with, but I found that the latch didn't work at all with the quilt fabric unless you were putting a carrier with it. Carrier is a thicker piece of material. If you've got like a strip of quilt material, like this is the K facet, right, and it's thin, and if I were to put a carrier with it, I might put a piece of wool behind it, a strip behind it, so when I pull up each loop, it has a little more body and integrity than if I just pull it up like this. It's a lot flatter. Gives a different look, gives a very busy look, but you see what I mean in terms of body and fullness. More materials, more expense, right? So these are considerations too. But in the end, I decided to hook into the linen that I stock here. It's Michelle McGarley's linen. It's the only linen that I use. Could equally do burlap, but I think burlap might be a little bit too loose of a weave to hold really thin slices of the quilt material. I don't have my ruler. I wonder how thick this is. Look at it next to my hand. I have normal hands, not huge hands, but I get 4 strips out of each jelly roll, and I cut off the sort of corrugated zigzag on the edges, right? And it still gives me 4 strips. So I'm hooking into linen. You could hook into monk's cloth. The problem with monk's cloth for me, when I've done this in the past and used quilt material to hook into monk's cloth, is monk's cloth is so tight that sometimes the loops come up pinched, and then you have a hard time getting the loftiness of the loop to balloon open, right? Because it's coming from such a tight hole. Does that make sense? So I kind of rejected for myself hooking with quilt fabric into monk's cloth because I felt the backing was too tight. It's a bit of a Goldilocks situation here with too tight, too loose Lautrec, right? The burlap is too loose. And what's in the middle for me is the linen. So that's what I've been going for on this. And no, it's very long-winded answer. It's very easy to hook. It's very easy to hook. And I'll say con, right? The loops are, well, they're not as puffy, right? Because I didn't put a carrier with this. Let me get this out of the way. We can get a little more light in here. I didn't put a carrier with these loops. So they're not as lofty as wool, right? But I do like the way it looks. I'm going for impact, right? Overall impact. When I finally figure that piece out, this is the drawing for the piece that I worked out this morning. I like to put my drawings up on the wall so I don't lose them. But where was I going with that? Hang on. So con is that if you like a really full loop with a big head on it that you can really see the color, The quilt fabric is much thinner than other materials, so you might like that aspect of it less. Plus side, you get lots of colors in. I find it faster to hook with. It does not fray, or it doesn't get thready as you might think it would. It really doesn't. Unless you pull it out many times, you can pull it out and hook it again, right? And there really is no consequence to that. You think it'd be all wimpy and damaged if you pulled it out too many times. It's pretty good. Well, at least the K facet fabric is such a high quality cotton. It doesn't do that. You can pull out, make mistakes as I have with this project, and keep hooking it back in 2, 3, 4 times without consequences. So in that regard, it's fine. It's a big plus for me being able to hook faster, and it also does nothing because I've been hooking a lot with it. Sometimes wool it works on my hand or my thumb just in terms of like a little bit of pain, right? The quilt fabric doesn't do that at all because it's so easy to pull through. So pluses and minuses with everything, right? It's all about decision making. But I mean, if you are a person who already has a shameful stash of quilt material, you are now validated and justified in buying all of that stuff, right? Having the Amazon truck pull up and drop off all of the stuff that you bought in the past. You are now validated because you can use that for hooking, and it really does look beautiful. And I'll be doing more videos on it. I'll be putting this out, and I'll be teaching more, both online and in person, on hooking with quilt fabric, a combination. I like the way the quilt fabric looks with wool because wool has that flat, sort of chalky, powdery, matte, heavy, warm texture, and particularly the K facets have almost this tropical, the colors that I'm choosing anyway, look, and very, very different. Lots of contrast, lots of drama, and it's making for some great pieces. If only I could make up my mind, right? So let's see. Let me catch up on Dave. Where are my scissors? Anita, good to see you in London, Ontario. Good to see you. I'm sorry I missed saying hi, and then I answered Judy. Unweaving is slow. Absolutely, it's frustrating working backward. It's like, yeah, it's super frustrating. But it's often worth it. If you can stomach it, it's worth it, right? Can't just eat local honey. Oh, there's a place right next door that sells it. I'll stop and get some. That could help a lot, right? That'll help you build up a tolerance. Are you serious? That's amazing. I love honey, and thanks for saying that. There's a garden store right next door, and they have a local honey sign outside. So I'll definitely stop there when I'm done. Kirsten, I'm working my pattern based on the Design Like Paul Klee pattern, getting it onto a grid for a basic sketch. Amazing. Don't forget to tune in on Tuesdays. Kirsten hosts the Hook-In from 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are a beginner, if you're struggling with any part of the rug making craft, whichever sort of branch that you're doing, this is a great opportunity to log in, find friends, get some help, be able to hold stuff right up to your screen and say, what's going on with this piece? This is a great opportunity to be able to do that. Outside of a classroom situation, you probably just need some buddies who can look at your work and go, that's what that is. Fixed, right? So think about that. If you're a beginner or if you just want the company on Tuesdays, Kirsten hosts the Hook-In every Tuesday. And I will try to pop on this Tuesday. We'll see how it goes. Dawn, like locker hooking. Less frustrating than locker hooking because locker hooking is in latch backing. And with locker hooking, I struggle with, I don't like the string under the loops. That the part that's locked, the locked part of the locker hooking is the part I really don't like. I don't like the geometry of having the string yarn snake under all of the loops on the surface of. I just don't, for myself, like the look of it. I did include it in the first book that's coming out in July as a chapter, and I like the project that I did, and it's fine. But to be perfectly honest, I find the locker part of that craft unnecessary because if you've got the right fabric and the right backing, you don't need to lock it. It will stay for eternity. The insects will have taken over the earth and your piece will still be pristine, right, when we're all gone. So that was depressing. Sorry about that. Yeah, it is in that regard like locker hooking. When I did locker hooking with quilt material, I always felt like I didn't have the right cut. Either it was too wide and it was kind of ballooning inside out on the sides of each loop, or it was too thin and it was really, at least with the locker hooking, at risk of showing the string that's hiding underneath all of the loops. But in terms of pulling up the loop with cotton, the way that feels is like locker hooking. So in practice, it feels like locker hooking, but with using the linen backing, it's more like rug hooking. because you're not pulling it up and it wants to fall right back through because the latch is such a broad, wide, open gauge, and the linen is not super tight, particularly the linen that I stock, Michelle's linen. So it's for me, it's like Goldilocks, the middle one, just right. Porridge is ready to eat. It's like perfect. But I think from project to project that could also change. Sure thing, Judy. Country gal, good to see you. And wait a minute, I see some more. Allie says the strips are 2.5 inches, so the strips must be a smidge over half an inch. That sounds and that looks absolutely right. Thanks for doing the math on that. Yep, I think you're absolutely right. This one's not quite even. This must be, this. I folded them in half, you know, like this kind of thing. So they're not perfectly even. I was using my quilt ruler, my rotary cutter, and my, you know, self-healing, the scar-proof board to cut them because it's quicker than scissors. But you could also do scissors. What I would not do if I was hooking with quilt fabric is rip. Because if you've ever ripped quilt fabric, and I don't want to rip any K facet because it's too fine, when you rip quilting fabric, you do get that kind of curly edge, and it does get very frayed, doesn't it? Routinely. So I wouldn't do that because I think you'll end up with too much mess showing and not enough loop. And for me, part of the prettiness of the look is you get a few little strings. Right? It's very tactile looking with a few little strings sticking up. But if it was all curly, ruffly, you know, damaged edges, kind of a lot of the white from the underside of the printing showing, to me it would look less attractive and you would lose the impact of all this colorful print. Lots to think about. When hooking, I'm hooking with the K facet, right? So it's printed material. So it's printed on one side and the other side is a lot lighter, right? There's an incorrect side and there's the correct side that's bright and beautiful. So I aim to pull my loops up with this side showing. But if you are a beginner rug hooker and you want to hook with quilt fabric, I would say start hooking with Kona cottons or whatever cottons, the poly cottons from Joann's. It's like $3 a yard before coupons because they're not printed, right? They're the same color on both sides. As with batiks, which are much more expensive but also beautiful, not printed, same on both sides. So when you're pulling up your loops, if you're a beginner and your hands are not really working in a way that every loop you pull up is not perfect yet, and it will be soon, I'm sure, but if it's not yet, you might want to think about using materials where there is not a wrong side. Because Murphy's Law, as you pull them up, how many out of 100 will be pulled up on the wrong side by accident? Probably 99, right? All things considered. So make it easy on yourself. It is fun. It's a lot of fun. Monique, great to see you in England. You've hooked with wool. Absolutely. I'd love to try fabrics as well. And it's easier. Probably you have a lot of quilt stores there, and you have a lot of handcraft stores there with like sewing stuff. And a lot of those materials will cross over too. More on that in just a minute. Monique, I asked you what part of England, right? Because Jane is in Wales. I think we had this conversation. You're not near each other, right? Yeah, I'm trying to think of our other buddies who are there that tune in for shows and where they are. Kara, good to see you in Illinois. Linda H. in Massachusetts, good to see you. So it's such a good group, the Ribbon Candy, the Rug Hooking Tuesday group. Yeah, it's a nice group of people. And Carol says, also beautiful here in your part of Wisconsin, country gal. We have great weather. It is great. It is beautiful. It's all coming together. Now, before we start the show, which we have officially, I just planned something this morning. So you know how we were getting going, and I just mentioned that we would be running this show on the Webb Deane Stevens house, and this tour that I took, Digging Deeper, right? And remember how I said on the way home, I was so inspired by the handcrafts, and so many of us do things besides rug hooking, right? We weren't living like in a cave using chalks and rocks to make fires. Before we discovered rug hooking, we were probably into all kinds of crafts, right? Because we're crafty people and we like to be creative and we like to see what other people are working on and feed off that. And probably you, like me, have done lots of crafts, right? So I stopped going to this event and talking about needle arts, just reinforced in my mind that it's no different. Whether I'm holding my hook or my needle, it really doesn't make any difference. I'm doing something that feeds my heart and soul in this exact same way. So I stopped at the needlepoint store. Do you remember this conversation on Monday? And it's called Thistle Needleworks. And it is on the Celestine Highway in Wethersfield. And I was saying, I got talking to Judy, the owner, and we started having some great conversations. And I started learning the names of some people who've done rug hooking in different crafts and participated in the sort of evolution of that particular store and some of the needlepoint, needlecraft brands, right? And it was such a big conversation, and it seemed like so many North Yorkshire. Okay, good, good. I think we did say that, and I said how much I love that area and how I have not been to the city of York for such a long time. What a beautiful area. Katz Gallery, you're there in Southern California. So, I got thinking about that again, and I said, let me try to set up a date with Judy where we can go back and I can talk to her for a while because she's got a lot of stories and she is an absolute font of information. So it got me really excited, really interested, and I told you in the last episode that I bought some handcraft materials from Judy. These are all from Thistle Needleworks in Wethersfield, and I bought these colors that are kind of like a strawberry palette for me, all different colors of pinks and a few greens, right? And these are like one ply wools, right? One ply, and teeny, teeny, tiny. And I was thinking about starting a project with Russian punch, also known as miniature punch. So not the traditional Oxford punch needles, much smaller, where you make the very small pieces of loops. Same thing, right? Same thing as traditional punch. But with these beautiful, wools, this tiny, I'm thinking, how can I use them? What can I do? And I think I will start my Paul Klee piece using the strawberry colors. And I'm trying to think of a creative way. I realized as I was sitting there and going through, there's so many different materials, and we're going to look at them together on Friday. That's where this conversation is headed, because I'm going back to Wethersfield on Friday. I'll give you the details in just a minute on that. But I was sitting there thinking about how can I use all these beautiful wools, because they're so soft and tactile. It's like a cloud of color, right? I realized I was sitting eliminating, I had a little bit of each color, right? I was doing a bit of a rainbow thing. Grab a blue, grab a green. And then I realized I had left myself with lots of pinks, dusty roses, greens, one kind of red, violet, purple. And I realized that I was, again, my mind was going back to like the 1980s and the Strawberry Festival at the Old White Church in the town where I grew up in Barrington, Rhode Island. And that is always on my mind, particularly at this time of year, the strawberry festivals and the things that they used to do at the church. And that was, for me, I moved away from there 30 years ago. But that's still in my mind where I'm from. And I miss this event and I miss those days. And I know that while I was walking around those strawberry festivals as a very young person, probably Molly Nye Toby and some of the great hookers from that area were walking around me, and I hadn't discovered any of these crafts yet. But anyway, I came up with a strawberry palette that reminds me so much of those days and really pulls on my heartstrings when I realized what I was doing. So I'm going to be working on something with this palette that also involves a Paul Klee design, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge for me to put together. But that's what I'm going to be working on Friday, because I'm going to be going over to Thistle Needleworks on Friday. I'm going to show you, I had a photo of it, so check this out, right? So this is one corner of this vast store. This is in Wethersfield, Connecticut. If you are anywhere near here, I will be here on at Thistle Needleworks on the Silas Deane Highway in Wethersfield, Connecticut, starting at 11 in the morning on this coming Friday. If you can be there, please come. Judy, good to see you. Sharon, oh, beautiful thin wools, and Thistle Needleworks ships as well. So I think this is Judy on here. Because of the spelling of Judy, that's my clue. They ship. So when I go through on Friday, if you're seeing things you like, right, I'm going to try to do a live show. Just know that these are things that you can have in your hands, right, that will come through the mail to you. I want to look at all of the inventory, and we can talk live about what crosses over, and we'll talk with Judy about what crosses over. And this is a piece of corniness that Ariane helped me with. Da-da-da! I forgot to take a picture of myself there, so we superimposed it this morning. Kind of silly, but I will be there this coming Friday, Thistle Needleworks, Silas Deane Highway, Wethersfield. I'll be there at 11, and I want to do a live video. So this is Judy. She's on live with us. You can ask her questions directly if you want. And we'll be back together on Friday. I will be there, and I want to go through the store. I want to talk with Judy and her daughter, Karen, and any of the other employees that are there that were super fun when I was there on Saturday. Look at some of the things that are for sale. It's a great store for new old stock. It's a great store for new stuff. It's a treasure chest of a store. So I'll be there doing a little shopping myself, and I'll bring you through with me. And then I'll probably sit for a while and start working on my piece. And I said in the Facebook post that I made, if you are local and you come, I'm going to bring a bunch of my pretty punches. You know, I have Ultra Punch too, but I have a lot of pretty punches and I have a lot of extras, and they're not sold anymore. So if you are going to come, let me know, because I'm going to bring those. And anybody that is showing up that might want to work on a project, maybe pick up some of the, I think this is, Judy, you have tons of backing materials there, obviously, including weaver's cloth for mini punch. I think this is the muslin, because I think I was going to do not work on this. But I'm going to grab some weaver's cloth there. You could sit with me and absolutely take one of the punches to keep, because I've got a bunch and I won't sell them online because they're vintage, right? And I have X amount. But if you're coming, let me know and I'll bring a pretty punch for you. And I'm hoping we can sit down for a little while and I can work on this project with the wool I bought there and get that started. And maybe you want to start a similar project with me. We could just freehand something onto some backing and get going on a project. But I would love to see you there if you're local. I know most of you are not. But if there's any way that you can make it, it's something that we could do together that would be a lot of fun. So I hope to see you there. Absolutely beautiful store. So I'm really looking forward to that. And right around the corner from where Judy is at Thistle Needleworks is the Webb Deane Stevens Museum. And let's talk about that. What a beautiful day this was. It was a beautiful weather day. It was really the one that we were all waiting for, I think. As I say, along the main street of Wethersfield, you get a lot of lovely old historic houses. So many places these days, I'm not going to start soapboxing it, but these old houses get knocked down and stuff. It's an absolute heartbreak. Oh, Judy says the class table seats 8 comfortably, so come. And if you can give me the heads up, I want to be able to bring needles for people who are coming. So let us know if you're going to come and you're going to sit for a while. It'd be fun to do a live video and sit together. So, and spread the word with your friends, even if they're not people who have done rug hooking or needlework, right? It's no pressure. It's just for fun. Come and see what other people are doing, what other people are working on. When you're in a setting like that, you can certainly pick up a needle, little bits of material, and get started very inexpensively. This one Judy that found for me is like $4.50 for the backing. It's like a scrappy leftover piece. If you haven't done this before and you just want to get a little hoop and get some little things and get going, this is the perfect opportunity to do it with people who, I mean, I'm figuring it out too, because I've never punched with these materials. And I'm really hoping that they're going to work, because I want to buy some more stuff and I want to buy some of the metallic stuff. And I really want to figure out how to combine using a needle with our rug hooking. Because for me, if we can get both of those things working together in the same piece, we are looking at infinite possibilities, right? So absolutely come and bring your friends. It's going to be a really fun day, as was this. So this is, I'm not sure, I think this might be the Silas Deane house. We walked into a couple of houses because the tour included a few buildings. The first place that we walked into was the gift store space, where you pick up your ticket, which I'd already purchased online. Got my sticker so they knew I was legit and ready for the tour. And I accidentally came early. So I had a little bit of time to walk around. And it's a beautiful gift store with some lovely books, very Connecticut centric, as you can imagine. Very interesting for me as a person who's really interested in New England history and currently living in Connecticut. Beautiful vignettes like this old hearth scene with some herbs drying. It looks like lavender in front of the fire, right? You get to look at some old spinning stuff. The spinning wheel, the old standing swift, right? The work basket with the yarn in it. Some bits and pieces are for sale. Some little antique bits are for sale, but most of it's for display. Beautiful woven basket, very authentic displays with appropriate costume, homespun materials, home loomed materials, right, in these old costumes. A lot of information about the houses that are along the main street. A real spectacle for the eyes. It's a beautiful museum space, and there are artifacts like archaeological dig type artifacts. Super interesting. I'm focused on the textile stuff for you because of the nature of this show, but if you go there, you'll see lots of different things that are interesting and unique to the area, right? Not just textile-y stuff, because the museum holds lots of treasures. Candace, I need that honey bad. So this is like one of the vignettes. Let me stretch it open a little bit. In one of the first rooms where we were waiting for the tour to sort of start, waiting for it to be the right time, Again, I was early. Beautiful stuff like this. You see this nice old sewing table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, octagon. Beautiful old sewing table with the fabric basket that comes out attached from underneath, and just these moments in time, right? The brass candlestick, the imported kind of Canton china teacup, beautiful American. I would assume this is an American chair with the stenciled backing on it. Um, the three homes plus the barn make up the WDS. That's better, Judy. Museum is owned and operated by the Colonial Dames. I did not know that. I did not know that. Judy, do you know how one becomes a colonial dame? Do you have to, is it like the Daughters of the Revolution that you need to have pedigree of a certain kind, or can you just join? That sounds tremendous and exciting. I kept seeing that phrase and I didn't really know what it meant. So that's exciting. You know, I'm trying to horn in on a piece of that action. But beautiful vignettes like this, you know, this early American furniture and cabinet making was a very big deal too. So we're seeing some extraordinary pieces of furniture. When I see two chairs like this sitting next to each other, I think, God, is it the right time for me financially to be collecting early American chairs? Because just look at the back of them. Is that calling out to be a pattern, a design of some sort? Can't you see the backs of these chairs as being putting them together into a kind of a frame, or creating a composition that is just made up of early American like chair backs? I mean, to me, this seems like the one on the right kind of looks like a harp, and the one on the left is a heart. So beautiful, and there's a child's game up front, like a kind of domino-related thing, and a little card game, and another work basket. And in this picture, we're seeing a framed chair seat. I can't remember if this was made in Wethersfield. If you expand this photo, you'll probably be able to see. But the reproduction on the chair obviously is a contemporary reproduction done in the classic kind of carnation design. Let me see if I can come a little bit closer. The one that's framed is the original chair seat, and it has some age, right? It's an old piece. Um, Absolutely beautiful reproduction. And I remember, I think that it was Elizabeth talking, saying that there are other known copies of this chair, but this is the only original seat. I think that's known here in Connecticut. I think there are replica chairs, she said, at like the Winterthur Museum, maybe the Metropolitan or the Folk Art Museum, but they are in other places. It's a real privilege to have an important piece like this in Connecticut and at this museum. They are absolutely beautiful, April, aren't they? They really take your breath away. When you see things of this age together, it gets your heart really pumping, doesn't it? Lots of displays with this kind of sampler book. You know how in these old girls' school, right? Because obviously girls would be schooled in a different way than boys would be schooled. And they were schooled in needle crafts, needle arts, and not necessarily penmanship, writing, certainly reading, right? Because you would need to read the Bible, but not necessarily needing to read novels or anything like that. Very discouraged. You would be schooled in needle crafts and things that would make you indispensable around the home, right? In your role as the female figure in the home, mother, daughter, child, aunt, spinster, sister, whatever. You would have to make stuff. And these little notebooks from these old schools, and there is believed to be two, according to Elizabeth, Elizabeth and Linda again gave the tour. There was thought to be two schools just in Wethersfield that were for girls that taught handcrafts. And this is a subject I'd like to know a lot more about. This is going to require a little more time than I have at this moment in my life, I mean. But I would love to get to the Historical Society in Wethersfield and find out more about the curriculum at both of these schools. I have more knowledge about some of the schools in Maine from back in the day when I was a tour guide, but I didn't know that there were two schools in Wethersfield. And this is the kind of work, this little bit of red work here, that you would expect to see girls doing these stitches and then putting them into their little books for the teacher to see and to grade. I'm not seeing grades on these. I have had in my possession in the past books that I've gotten from Europe, same story, from England, from the Netherlands, places that I've lived, that are little notebooks again from the same kind of period, 19th century, where from page to page you have an example of a handcraft that was an exercise that would be graded. And one of the ones, I ended up selling the whole collection because You know, when I left the Netherlands, I was not in the best place mentally, and it wasn't a great memory for me. So I wasn't going to display like all of this Dutch stuff that I had collected, the needlecrafts and everything. But it was beautiful, and I knew someone else really wanted it, and I ended up selling it to um, a Dutch woman who was living in the United States. So she was very happy to get this whole collection. But it was interesting because I had a bunch of these little notebooks, and being a different country, being the Netherlands, they are much more, they have historically been much more interested in different kinds of handcrafts. For example, like black work, red work, smocking. Smocking was a big one, and almost every page involved smocking. Yes, we do smocking here, but not to the same extent historically as you would see smocking, cut work, things like that in the Netherlands, right? Still very, very, cross stitch, I think, is like neck and neck with quilting in the Netherlands still. Very big craft. So a little bit different from country to country, as you would expect. I took a picture of this quote because it spoke to me. I thought it might speak to you too. I actually ordered this book from Amazon, The Girl's Own Book by Mrs. L. Maria Child, 1834. It's also available as a print on demand for practically no money. And I don't know what the content's like till I get it, but this quote sold me on it. In this country, it is peculiarly, difficult word to say, necessary that daughters should be so educated as to enable them to fulfill the duties of a humble station or to dignify and adorn the highest. I thought that was so beautiful because it's basically saying in this country, right, and this is decades ago in the US, 200 years ago, um, these schools are trying to create, form young women who are capable of being very, very handy and capable at home, whether their domestic situation is very, very basic and primitive, or whether they are going to hold a very high position socially, economically in their world in the future. We're preparing them for all eventualities. And I thought that's a really empowering kind of a quote. And to come out of a sort of small Connecticut town like Wethersfield, I don't know if that's where Maria Child was from. I don't know if this references that, but I think that this is a reference to the girls' schools that were there at the time. Just the idea that you would be preparing girls to be able to do great things and not just exist, right, is a hell of a good sentiment for us in any age. Now, this is the Wall of Mourning stuff, and this is where the tour really began. So we gathered in here and looked at some stuff. I want to enlarge this. Allie, you said these handcrafts are just sadly not taught to our girls anymore. It taught them not only art, but a sense of accomplishments and self. Absolutely, I agree with that so wholeheartedly. And I think for me at 51, I was in Barrington, Rhode Island. We had home ec, and it was petering out. And it was like the era where I took both home ec and woodworking. I think I was the only girl in woodworking. And yes, I almost cut my hand off. But they offered both. And there were boys at home ec, and and I know you know this story too. They were teaching us cooking and sewing and things like that. And certainly because of that, I was already sewing, but I started sewing more. And I had my own sewing machine, and I watched the movie Pretty in Pink, and I started sewing my own clothes. And that really set me up to go to college for fashion design and graphic arts, and to go to RISD, and then to move to England and do theater design and theater construction, textiles and construction in the West End theater, like on a very high level, really set me up for that. And I really put that down to those home ec classes, because if I didn't build the confidence at a younger age, feeling like my hands were capable of holding a needle, holding an iron, holding a ladle, holding a saw, holding anything, if I didn't feel like I had some skills built in from those years, I don't know that I would have gone in that direction later, right? I leaned into it because it was something I already knew and felt confident about. Without that, yeah, there's not a lot of people doing handcrafts anymore. It's a massive loss because it's a great form of expression. It's a great outlet for creativity. It's a great way to give yourself self-help, self-care when you're feeling however. Work on your projects. What's better than that? I've never had a doctor who can help me more than my crafts can help me, right? It's a big loss. April says, we were in junior high. They made us do both. The boys had to take home ec, and the girls had to take woodworking together. I think that was a great thing. I mean, it was all sexist back then, and really it still is. And I don't really have a problem with that, as I'm not much of a feminist, but I do think it's important to teach people how to do stuff. Otherwise, you get a generation of people who bring their pants and blouses with the button bust off to the dry cleaner to sew on. And that really is, like, I can't think of a lot of things that make me sadder than that. That is a really sad state of affairs when you can't fix basic things yourself because you have no skills. Um, I love these conversations, and it's hard to not get on the soapbox. So looking at this piece, I want to enlarge this a little bit more. This is like a family tree, a version of a family tree or a family history. And certainly we talk about this a lot on this show because we talk about, for example, Magdalena Bryan Eby a lot in Perry County, Pennsylvania. We talk about different versions of family trees, right? I consider her lollipop tree to be a variation on a family tree. That's why I said that. Normally, when we're looking at family trees and family records, they are not this decorative. This one is wildly decorative. It's hard to tell from the photo, and of course, these are very carefully glassed in, all archival materials, I'm sure, right? The very best and kept very well. Judy says the needle arts are taught to some lucky children in some needlework shops, Girl Scouts, 4-H. Yeah, as long as those things exist, I have hope, right? We did a lot of needle stuff in Girl Scouts and brownies when I think about it. Judy Phillips says, April, love that. There have been so many times I wished we could build frames and other tools. I need to do fiber art. Yeah, maybe we should make it as soon as I finish this design like book and we got both books out the door, maybe we should take a break and do like a early American chapter and make some visits to people and figure out how to make some basic materials ourselves, just feel a bit more capable, not just with rug making, but with all kinds of crafts, right? Monique says, and remember, Monique is in Yorkshire. My son Anton, 14, wants to learn how to sew a waistcoat, which I think is wonderful. It is so wonderful, and that's such an easy thing to sew. He's going to be so gratified when he sews it, looks fantastic in it, and has the privilege of knowing that he made it himself and can boast about that, as he should. Allie says, we grew up on a farm in Massachusetts, 3 girls and a boy. We did all chores. If it needed to be done, we did it all. That's such a romantic kind of Little House on the Prairie feel to it. Even though Little House on the Prairie makes me depressed. Do other people? Is it just me? I like this story much more. I guess I'm more of an Anne of Green Gables girl somehow. I don't know why. Maybe it's just that era of television, right? But yeah, I think we all love this conversation. In fact, I was saying to my son Teddy as I was dropping him off at school today, I said, I can really see Mama, being me, wanting to have like animals in the future. Because he said, it started off, what's the next pet we're going to have? Can we have a snake? Probably not. No, not a snake. And I said, do you want to get some more hermit crabs this summer? And both him and his sister Jocelyn said no, because the hermit crabs we got from a pet store on Cape Cod, which was probably a bad call because they had been traumatized and they only lived for like a year and they can live very long. And we took very good care of them with the temperature control gauge in this huge aquarium, all of the things that they were supposed to have, not from the pet store, from really fresh things, and they still didn't live long. And they believe that the hermit crabs were traumatized, and that's entirely possible. They were overly handled and fell many times in the shop. Whatever. Point is, I went on to say probably not a snake, probably not a bunny, right? Because we have a Yorkie, and I said, but Mama's thinking about like in the future having goats and sheep and stuff like that. And Teddy said, well, why would you want something like that? And I said, well, first of all, you got to love a goat because they have crazy faces and they're crazy eyes with the little rectangle slits. And they always look like there's something wrong, something happening right behind you, right? They're crazy eyes. And I love the noises they make and how social they are. And I said, but mostly they have, wool, and you can brush their wool off and take their wool off them and spin it, and I could use that for yarn for my projects and stuff. And ooh, new world. He has no idea. He has no idea that this sort of early American world can eclipse our modern times, right? We can roll it backward and enjoy these great things. And Judy says embroidered jeans are back in fashion. Absolutely. The jeans I wore to your place on Saturday, the whole bottom of them was embroidered and a bunch of pearls sewn on. I love that. April says, have you ever done the butterfly house project with your kids? It's so awesome. You could see them go from a chrysalis to butterfly. No, I haven't, and I'm ashamed. And I think I will because we went to the Butterfly Festival in Durham, Connecticut, a year or two ago. I think it was last year. Teddy dressed as a troll and Jocelyn dressed as a butterfly. And we saw them making butterfly houses. And we actually bought seeds for bee balm. Is it bee balm? Some plant that you can plant. I still have them. We haven't planted the seeds. How awful am I? But we were thinking we wanted to do all that stuff. And then I noticed on the calendar, I missed it for last year. I'll see where I am as a jumping off point for this year. Maybe it's not too late because I know where the seeds are. Probably is too late because they're probably blooming right now. But I noticed that on the calendar at Hammonasset Beach, because again, I'm in Connecticut, there was a launch date. I forget what time of year it was when all the butterflies that were like brought forth in this massive movement, people trying to attract butterflies. Um, what's the right word when butterflies are reproducing? I don't even know. But many butterflies were created, came out of the chrysalis, were born. And then they, I guess, go to the beach and they let them loose. And apparently they fly to Mexico, I think it is. And I'm not sure if they come back at the next year or whatever, but I missed that event too. I missed the whole butterfly event. But that ties in very well with what we're talking about because also at the Webb Deane Stevens house, there's tons of gardens, right? The gardens are a huge part of it, and everything is marked very, very well. So conversations about gardens, plants, insects are super relevant with all kinds of early American talk. And I want to talk about this stuff too. Carol says, Robin and I are taking an embroidery class this afternoon at your local cultural center. Fantastic. Will you take some pictures for us? And can I post them next week when we do another episode? I'd love to post them. They're the monarchs for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, they were the monarchs. So I'm going to look at the thread some more because I hate missing the conversation, but I thought this was an extraordinary piece. And what I wanted to really pop in this piece is the amount of stitching that's happening here. I'm struggling a little bit with the format. Hold on, let me come back here and pull this open a little bit. Can you see from looking at this piece from a distance, can you see that the background has a little bit of watercolor paint to it? Do you see how at the horizon it's faded? Obviously, this is an old piece. A little bit of blue to a little bit of the sort of peachy apricot, and it goes to a white sky. So I don't know whether this is painted by the person who does the needlework or if that is added later. And I'll tell you why I wonder in just a minute. But you can see there are all kinds of stitches happening here. I see a lot of satin stitch, right, the long stitch. If you do crewel embroidery, different kinds of embroidery that involve different lengths of stitch, or if you're a fan of Erica Wilson, if you're a fan of Thistle needleworks, if you're a needle artist, you know there are infinite numbers of stitches, and this piece contains many. Part of it is painted as well. I think that the background, I'm 99% sure it's hard with my eyesight, even looking at it at this size. I think that behind the tree, that hilly landscape, and possibly the figure on the bridge, I think that they are painted. And I think possibly the distant houses are painted, but the rest of it is stitched. It's an incredible amount of stitching. Do you see at the top of the piece where the eagle is holding like the garland or the bough of flowers? Do you see the sketch of the eagle behind it? Almost like it was meant to go a little bit further up and then it was actually made lower, right? So that's interesting because it's a slightly different shape too. That was kind of a change of mind. I think seeing that work in the piece really adds to the romance of the piece. If you're from anywhere near here and you're familiar with the Connecticut River, which this is, if you look at the horizon under the hill, but to the right of the tree, to the left of the bridge, there is like a little rectangle. Let me try one more time to make this larger. It's an early steamboat, right? Because this piece appears to be 1813. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you see on the water there's a rectangular barge type form, and that is a steamboat going up the Connecticut River. So transportation supplies. That looks like somebody on horseback or some kind of a small trap coming across the bridge. Absolutely amazing piece. Yes, Melissa, it's so funny that you say that because I was thinking that too. The color of mauve that they have the background painted is so, we're going to see more slides of it, is so beautiful. It really pops these old pieces. It's a nice matte color, kind of an antique mauve, right? Really pops these pieces. And that is a Victorian era color, right? The invention of mauve was a big deal. They were trying to invent, I think, penicillin, right? But instead, mauve came about. And the first aniline dye, right, was a big deal. So seeing that color on the wall is really special, and it goes remarkably well with these pieces of needlework that we're seeing. This is an example of mourning art, as you can imagine. And we had the conversation here and throughout the talk, both Linda and Elizabeth knew a lot about mourning art and made the point that should be made that there was a time in history where stiff upper lip, right? you weren't, it was considered gauche and tactless to, no matter who died, show a lot of emotion, right? Because child mortality was very high. There's a lot of fighting, right? Whether it was colonial era, first settlement days, or heading toward the revolution, and after. A lot of fighting, a lot of death, not a lot of great nutrition. Life was a lot more dangerous, right? People lived a lot, lived shorter lives, right? Because everything was stacked against them. But death was commonplace, and public executions were also commonplace. People's threshold, I think, for violence and for loss and personal loss was much higher, but nonetheless, people were human beings. And it was considered in really poor taste to like um, wail and mourn and carry on, right? Because at the end of the day, as I think Elizabeth put it in the talk, she put it very well, you know, if someone was taken from you, that was God's will. And who are you to object to that, right? It is your duty on earth to comply with God's will. And if that is what happened, then that is part of the story and part of God's will. And you must um, accept that. And if not celebrate, at least not make a sort of fool out of yourself by carrying on. Now, this does change, particularly with the Victorian period, later in the Victorian period when Prince Albert dies. Um, this is the first example of like really protracted, long-winded mourning on Queen Victoria's part. And she was so deeply sad and lost without Albert. One of the great romances, right, of all time. She mourned for decades, and she was in mourning for decades, and England was in mourning for decades. And it became a fashion for people to mourn. And at that point, it was a lot more, in terms of fashion, which is the part that I know better, costume, it was a lot more acceptable and expected for you to mourn. You know, and then the pendulum really swung because the fashion had changed. And what a relief this must have been for all human beings. But it became, pendulum swung, and it became almost distasteful for you to come out of mourning too soon. And if you were, depending on what sort of level family member you were to a person that had died, if you were like a widow or the mother or the child or whatever, the sister, there were different timelines for when you could tastefully come out of mourning with what you were wearing, with the way your house was draped, right? If your mirrors were covered, if your windows were covered, you would move from deep mourning to lesser mourning, and it would be a long process if you were a close family member. So this changes a lot during our time, and mourning art is a big deal during this time. And it must have been very cathartic for people to be thinking of a lost loved one and to be able to work on a needlepoint project that would be eternal and beautiful. In this picture, I want to point out a couple of things, and we are right at the hour, so we'll probably continue this conversation on Friday. I was going to do gallery night Friday, but I forgot to put the word out, and I don't have I don't have enough pieces to run for 2 hours. So what we'll do on Friday is I will be with Judy, and we will be live for a while. I think we'll be live. I'll see how Judy feels about that. Otherwise, we'll record and edit. But if people show up with us and we're sitting doing some stuff, it might be fun to be live for a while. So be looking for that. If you are subscribed to this Candy, the channel, the Ribbon Candy Hooking channel, then you will get a notification. But be looking for me with Judy at Thistle Needleworks. I'm not ending the show just yet. On Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're in Connecticut. Please be with us there in person if you can. And please be looking for notifications for us either going live or posting a video as a result of the excitement that day at Thistle Needleworks. And later at night, I will be live with you 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for cocktail time. And instead of doing gallery night this week, we will do it next week. So please send all of your pieces, your sketches, whatever you're working on. We're talking about needlecrafts in general. So if you're working on stuff, if you are inspired by the past episodes and you aren't working on a hooked rug or a punched rug, and you're working on something else or even a sketch, please send it in so we can enjoy looking at whatever you're working on now. It's all interesting and exciting. It all crosses over. Inspiration. So I'll be doing that on Friday night. I'll be continuing the tour of the Webb Deane Stevens house. And we'll be talking about handcrafts a little bit more. I have a few slides left from the book that we were looking on, Handcrafts by Kathleen Eckhouse too. So Friday we'll continue the handcrafts talk, right? Just so we know what we're doing. But let's finish this episode out. I had a few things I wanted to point out in this slide because this is an excellent example of a female figure with some symbols of mourning. What do we think about when we think about symbols of mourning? Weeping willow trees, willow weep for me, right? The urn, right? The urn is a big one. Some of the other ones, obviously skulls, hourglasses. Regionally, there's lots of different symbols in different places. Country Gal says, I enjoy cross stitching because of the history and the reproduction samples. Absolutely. Country Gal, you have to tune in because I don't think you're near me, right? Tune in on Friday and check out all the needlepoint talk that we'll be doing. It's going to be right up your alley. I love that stuff too. Chime in if you have some ideas of I'm just thinking about symbols of mourning. I'm thinking about what has been common in New England. Maybe there's something different where you are. Some of the other things I want, here's some beautiful mauve wall. I'm just stretching this out a little bit. Some other things I wanted to tell you about this piece. It's on silk, right, as most pieces were. It's on silk, and we are seeing some beautiful stitching, right? This is all, it's behind glass, right? So there's a little bit of a glare. We're seeing some beautiful, a huge variety of stitches, and I don't know enough. I see some knotting in here too, probably French knots, right? Just single knots that are making the bushes look three-dimensional, really, it's really popping, whereas I'm seeing longer crewel type stitches in the background, almost a Jacobean feel to them, with the kind of lamb's tongues of colors from the evergreen to more of the sagey greens to the goldy green to the celery, right? Seeing that making up the lawn, absolutely beautiful. Covered up the mirrors, dawn. Yep, that's a classic. Watching that close. Oh, Country Girl, I'm glad you'll be watching. I know not everybody's, most people are not close. So for those of you who are, show up and represent, right? Oh, incidentally, the piece that the figure is leaning on is like an urn, right? So this is a memorial. And you see how there's text on the monument itself? That is stitched. Or no, that is not stitched. That is written. So that has been written in ink or paint onto fabric and applied. I think it's fabric. But that is written. That is not stitched. And one of the interesting things that came out of this conversation was, I'm just looking at the weeping willow tree and getting distracted. I'm wondering if that's a daisy stitch that's making up all of the little individual kind of fronds coming down on the weeping willow tree. Don't you love how she's half hidden? She's like almost being veiled. She doesn't have a veil, and you often do see a veil, but she's being veiled by the tree. And she is in this, what we called in New England, suicide costume. That would be very, very thin, very tight, lots of skin showing. Even in the winter, you're wearing this costume. A lot of girls dying of ailments that had to do with catching a horrible cold because they're wearing this costume, right? This is the Napoleon and Josephine Empire style costume, but it wasn't super practical in New England, certainly not in the winter. Allie says, I typically think of widow's weeds. Yes, widow's weeds. That is an expression I haven't heard lately, but absolutely. I think of widow's weeds as clothing, but looking at all of this greenery, it makes me wonder if there's some crossover language here. I think it was Elizabeth, maybe it was Linda, said something really interesting about this piece, and I'm going to relay that to you. This mourning piece was done. I'm not sure who did it. Let me see if I don't have the. I don't. I don't. There's no placard or anything like that. I think we were just talking about it. It is stitched, right, expertly. And there was a direction on the back of this piece, right? It is framed and it did not come down off the wall. There was a direction on, okay, Lucy Griswold, right there. That's it. You see it, Lucy Griswold, right there at the bottom. Can anybody read that? I'll stretch it again. I'm going to stretch it out. That's why I'm scrolling. See if you can read that date. Lucy Griswold. Griswold is a big name in Connecticut, too. We got the Griswold Inn in Essex, which is one of my favorite pieces. See if you can make that out. I can just make out Lucy Griswold. There's a direction on the back of this piece that is hidden by the framing that was from Lucy Griswold that said to the framer, please paint an oval, but paint black around the edges, right? Because this is reverse painted. It is painted in reverse, and that was done by the framer. Right, so that's the point I'm making. I did not know that this happened. It was a very interesting thing to learn, that it was stitched by Lucy Griswold. She handed it off to the framer with the instruction, you paint the black oval. So, and you can see there's also decoration. If you look on the left, you can see kind of a faded golden star, but there is decoration on the framing. So the framer painted the oval, and you see there is a gold inset painted, reverse painted on the glass, and some other decoration painted on the glass. Now, of course, the framer is not going to get credit for this. Lucy Griswold stitched this piece, and that's the real prestige, isn't it? But it's kind of sad that the framer hasn't also been noted, because the framer's part in this, I'm going to assume that it was a man, is remarkable. There's a lot of decoration on the frame. Something to think about when you're at your local historical society, historic house, preservation hall, whatever, looking at these pieces. Check out these little details, because it could work the same way everywhere. I don't know anything about the history of framing. So that was a really interesting thing to learn. Another feather in the cap, right? To just know that and file that in your mind too. Allie says it was the black clothing of the Victorian era, the widow's weeds. And you know, there's so many, at least in New England, costume-wise, there's so many references to young girls being frustrated with being a close mourner, like a close family member, and expressing in diaries and things like, there's this big dance coming up, like it's a yearly event, it's a big deal, it's a ball, it's a coming out party. I want to wear that dress. I want to wear my lavender dress. And it's like, nope, you got to wear black, because we're still within these weeks or months of dad's death, that kind of thing. So it's just, life is so different, right? It's so important to hang on to the beginning of our story, right? Whether you live here or not, it's our shared story, right? We are all humans who live on Earth. It's our shared storyline, no matter where you live or where you're from. It's interesting to talk about it, to record it, to celebrate it, to visit it, to recreate it, and to recreate all these old crafts, right? So we got into 2 slides of needlepoint, sorry, today. And I didn't even show you the rug I was going to show you that I got at the Elephant's Trunk this weekend. These will be Friday things for us. So we are looking forward to a very big day Friday. I will just reiterate, 15 years. What am I missing here? Oh, I missed quite a bit. Let's see. John says, cover up mirrors. Okay. Gayla says, coffin quilts are really fascinating, and that's another rabbit hole. I don't know anything about coffin quilts. I'm going to have to go down that rabbit hole big time. That is interesting. I know about Waldoboro rugs, because we've talked about this before on the show, how with the absence in the winter of being able to put fresh flowers onto the coffin as it goes down into the ground. For those of you who are new, in Waldoboro, Maine, it was accustomed to make a hooked rug, very three-dimensional, very high pile, just the flowers, almost like a trompe l'oeil effect where the flowers pop out at you, to make it look like a real bouquet of flowers sitting on the coffin. And there certainly are many hooked rugs buried with coffins from that period around Waldoboro, Maine. Don't go digging. Allie says, I typically think of widows weaves. Okay, I missed some of those comments. Candace says, it looks like 1806 when I zoom in. Judy says, 15 years. 15 years. I missed the reference to that. That's probably mourning, a mourning timeline kind of a thing. You are so welcome. Of course, mourning is different from place to place, too. If you lived in England during the Victorian period, you were looking at a much longer timeline because of Queen Victoria, right? I know there's very mixed feelings right now on the whole coronation story, so we won't go down that rabbit hole, right? We're not political on this channel. But it's interesting thinking about mourning and talking about mourning because, we don't really do it anymore. Even at funerals, you know, we're not really all in black at funerals anymore either. Funny how these things begin and transpire. So you are so welcome for a great day. And again, I'll just remind you, if you joined us late, that on Friday, this coming Friday, I will be with Judy at Judy's shop in Wethersfield, Connecticut on the Silas Deane Highway. The link is in the description to this video. It is also in our Facebook group, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club. I will be there at 11 or around 11. I'm driving from Massachusetts. So hopefully won't hit traffic, but I'm shooting to be there at 11, and I want to do a video looking at all of the treasures in the store, looking at all the materials, all the things that you might use. I lost my wool, but that you might use for your needlepoint projects or your rug projects, right? A miniature punch rug with this. And we'll talk to Judy and chat, maybe hear some stories, get the backstory on some of the brands that are there. And yes, you can shop online. So, you know that whatever you're looking at is something you can say, I love that color. What color is that? And you can order it. Know that you're having the very thing that we're talking about. And if you are local, please come and join us. Starting at 11, I'll probably be there for a couple of hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours. We'll see how the day goes. It'll be a fun chance to get together, and I'll be starting my project, my mini punch project, with the Gentle Art wool threads from Thistle Needlecrafts. And And then I will be live with you if you are not local. I'll be live with you at 7 p.m. for our usual cocktail night, and we will continue looking at the historic houses in Wethersfield. Continuing that tour, looking at the needlecraft and the beautiful presentation that Elizabeth and Linda did that day when we did our Digging Deeper event this past Saturday. We'll cover that, and I will also finish up Kathleen Eckhouse's excellent book, Hooked on Handwork. We'll be doing an all handworked cocktail time this coming Friday. I will see you then, but hopefully I'll see you Friday morning in the meantime. If you are in the Punch beginner class with me, 4 to 6 tonight, I will see you later for Starflower. We'll be doing beginner punch class. Take care, everybody. If you need me in the meantime, I'm at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Send your gallery night pictures now so we can certainly have them in the show for not this coming Friday night, next Friday.